Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name's Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. Typically, I use the intro to tell you a little bit about the guest or dispense relevant information. But today, I figured I'd do something a little bit different. Today, I want to tell you about something that I love. I want to tell you about movie analysis on YouTube. I think I was vaguely aware of YouTube before moving to Tennessee to attend grad school, but it was after I moved here that I would say at the beginning fell in love with it, and in the end became semi-obsessed with it. I would spend study breaks pouring through it, and especially when I found that there were channels on YouTube that dove pretty deep into movie analysis, critique, and review. So much so that I had plans in grad school to even start a YouTube channel. That all changed, obviously, and now I'm podcasting. So I wanted to share a little bit about some of my favorite YouTube channels that have to do with movies with you. The first is Movies with Mikey. Mikey Newman is a part of a YouTube channel called Film Joy and, air quotes, reviews movies for them. I say air quotes because I think what Mikey does is so much more than that. He examines themes, talks about the process of making the movie, and, finds a way to make every single video hilarious.
But did you know?
He also recently collaborated with my next pick, and that's Patrick H. Willems. Patrick H. Willems does the YouTube video essay better, period, than period, anyone, period. And unlike anyone else who does long-form movie analysis on YouTube, he actually crafts narratives and stories and plots within his videos, becoming a character within his examination of the character. I'm not really sure that I know of anyone else that uses their own parents as characters in a video that have movies like the Fast and the Furious franchise and the Mission Impossible movies explained to them by their son from across the dinner table. And I've used a dinner table as my HQ for writing sessions. And the next channel I want to recommend is Lessons from the Screenplay. On it, Michael Tucker and his team examine the scripts that movies are made from, highlighting the importance of storytelling and the techniques that writers use to convey their message to the audience. If you'd like to check out any of these channels or follow any of their creators on Twitter, check out the show notes on this episode where I've included links to all of it. If you'd like, I can start dropping recommendations into the intro every week. Drop me a line on Twitter at therapisttheater, THTR, or email me your recommendations at therapisttheater@gmail.com, and I'll pass those along. Oh, I forgot to tell you that the podcast has an Instagram now. Instagram has long been my favorite social media platform, and now you can keep up with the show there too. So check it out by logging on to Instagram and searching for username Therapist Theater. Okay, let's talk about today's show. Today, I'm joined by Rob Fitzpatrick in the theater. Rob is the Director of Children and Teens Programs at the Refuge Center for Counseling in Franklin, Tennessee. He specializes in working with adolescent males, and because of that, he brought with him 1986's Stand By Me, a movie that I remembered solely based on its barf scene. But as with most episodes that have movies I saw as a kid, Rob was able to expand on what I can remember and go deeper, showing how so many of the characters in the movie are doing their best to cope with tremendous loss and pain stemming from past trauma. This is a good one, folks. So let's go ahead and dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Boom. We're recording.
We're live.
I love it. Rob, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, my pleasure.
How many podcasts have you done before?
This is the first.
The inaugural
going on
launch.
to the other side. It's weird.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I meant to bring a bottle of champagne that I could break over your shoulder,
Yeah.
but I forgot. Yeah. I'm so sorry. There's also, have you ever seen Community?
Mm-hmm.
So the episode where they're in the sailing class and Pierce just keeps banging the bottle on the boat and it won't break.
That was, in that episode is when they take beginner pottery, right?
Uh-huh.
And he just gets obsessed with the doctor who's doing it and trying to find out. And the guy from Arrested Development has one rule. Do you remember the one rule?
Yeah, no ghosting.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? So when we were at Starbucks and you said, are you ever going to do TV?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, Leigh-Ann and I are watching through Community. Yeah. She had never seen it. It is one of my favorite shows in the entire world. And we got to this episode Thursday, Friday last week, the Dungeons and Dragons episode. Mm. And I was like, oh, I could do one on that.
Yeah.
And I really want to. There's such an element in there of bullying, and there's a thing where when Jeff finally confesses what he did, it's out of shame and guilt, and it's not out of wanting to heal the relationship. He just wants it off his chest. So there's just so many things in that one. Because I think, like, Todd Wormers, when he was on, I was trying to convince him to do, he's really into, it's on NBC right now, This Is Us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was like, cool, do that. And he's like, no, man, it's too big. Like, it'd have to be like an 8-hour episode. And I was like, and? Like, what? But I think I could maybe make the D&D episode work on its own if you just give a little tiny bit of context.
That would be a good. Recently, I watched the one. It's like the second episode ever, where Abed wants to take a film class and his dad doesn't want him to. So Britta said, "Oh, we'll do it."
That's how I hooked Leigh-Ann. Was that episode? Yeah.
So that storyline is great, and then the other storyline where they're doing a skit, Pierce and Jeff. And they get it's supposed to be like, hello, how are you? I'm good. Go on. And they do this
in
big
Spanish
thing.
Class, yeah.
And then Senor Chang goes, F minus.
Oh yeah. I love it. Yeah, the Abed thing with his dad in the film class, it was one where, like, I'm pretty sure Leigh-Ann was just kind of like piddling around the house and maybe like grabbing some dishes and this kind of thing. And then it gets to that part where they watch the movie and it pans to his dad and was like, come here, come here. And I get her over there, and then, because we're both criers. She's an ultra crier. She's like advanced level crying. I'm still in the intro. And that got her, and that's what hooked her in, because we had just watched through Happy Endings. If you've ever seen that, that was an ABC one. If you have Hulu, it's all on there. Highly recommend.
Gotcha.
Because it's like a fire hose of jokes at you.
Yeah.
And it's all wordplay too, which is like right in my wheelhouse. Yeah. But when we got done with that, because it's only 3 seasons long, I said something like, hey, did you like that? And she goes, I did. Which always, kind of means not really. But she's like, but there was not much heart in it. Like, because for her, it's The Office. It's always The Office. Yeah. And she's like, there's just these moments in The Office, obviously giant cringe factor, this kind of thing. But there's these moments where it just grabs your heart. Yeah. Like where Jim tells Pam, I love you, and he kisses her for the first time. When, Dwight, tells Angela, I love you, however many with Michael. Yeah. For me, it's always when Kevin spills his chili. Like, it breaks me every time. But she's like, but Happy Endings didn't have any of that. And so when second episode of Community, whenever it pans over to Abed's dad and he's crying and he says, my son is tough to understand. So if this helps people understand him, I'll pay for the class. That's the, I got her. I got her right there.
And then when he's walking out, he's like, but falafel is a fallback. There's some falafel. Some great one, and like just little things like when you mess something up, calling it a Britta, right? Or when Britta, they have her all pronounce, she pronounces it bagel, and everybody's like, ugh.
Yeah. You're the worst.
Yeah. But going back to This Is Us, the only explanation I've ever gotten is like, oh, you watch that show, what's it about? It makes me cry a lot. Like that's not
Yeah.
that's not a selling point for me.
Yeah. And I've heard that, first episode makes you cry, and then it's worse and worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, it just sounds like self-abuse. Like, why are you putting yourself through that?
Yeah. That's what I know, like trying to think about a movie to talk about. It's like, man, I really use, and I don't think I'm going to change. Like, I use movies for an escape. So it's mainly like Will Ferrell, John C. Reilly. Like that's my wheel. I just want to laugh about dumb stuff for 2 hours. Like, let's go.
I did. So I did ask one therapist that ended up telling me no, just because he was busy at the time. But he was like, I'd really like to do Tommy Boy. And I was like, what? He goes, it's just so nostalgic for me. I was like, is there anything in there mental health or relationship wise? Like,
we just get together and talk about it.
Yeah, like, I mean, sure. Cruise 4-H babes, throw stuff off the bridge. Like, yeah, that was a very good high school movie for me, but we might need to go back to the drawing board. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. To find some substance or something, maybe,
Maybe he could do it. I don't know. If he can pull that off, I would be just incredibly impressed.
Really, like, turns into something he publishes, like Tommy Boy and philosophy.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
you see those things? Yeah.
Yeah. That's really what this podcast is. It's a way to me to get the thesis together before I start the PhD program. That would be good if I could use that. I don't know. Well, like I said, welcome.
Thank you.
I like to ask everybody, just as a way to get to know them, why you got into this thing. And really, you just kind of started a new thing too in the past couple months. Mm-hmm. So why therapy and why the new thing?
Yeah. So I've listened to all the episodes so far. So I knew this was coming. And it's kind of tough when people are like, what brought you into this or things like that.
There's not a wrong answer.
Yeah. Well, the thing I think back to is, I don't know if it was when I was a kid or I grew up in Boston. I've been told as I get more comfortable or more excited, my accent comes out. So maybe we can see over the course of the podcast what happened.
I grew up in South Carolina, and I've been told the same thing.
There you go.
So you're going to bend north, and I'm going to bend south, and I don't know, maybe we'll meet back in the middle at the end.
Exactly. But I remember, like, to go to a counselor was like, you're in big trouble. Like, you're in rehab, or you did something really bad that you, like, not, past a guidance counselor, past someone at your church or something, like, like you go to a counselor? And I still think, like, nobody's showing up to see me like, hey, things are great and I want to, but it's not like waiting till the last thing, like, I'm really messed up now, I need to see somebody. So
was there this idea in your head in the past that it had to be mandated? Like,
probably
you're only going when you're made to go.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, man, everything is terrible. It must be this really, really bad thing. So I was like, that shaped, what if I was going to go somewhere or not, or what it meant, like, I know a lot of times people talk about stigma, and it wasn't like somebody would come back from somewhere and we'd make fun of them. But when you heard somebody, went to somewhere, it's like, oh, whoa. But I know the parts of counseling that I love were really present in a lot of different places. So, like, growing up in the city, we had a lot of, like, my family spent a long time at the Boys and Girls Club, or, like, really had these connections with hockey coaches in particular, other coaches that were also from the neighborhood, and these other kind of programs where you'd get this kind of mentorship. And then if something went wrong, I can tell now in hindsight, my parents would go to this coach and say, hey, can you talk to Rob about this, or can you do that? And so we were finding these therapeutic relationships within. So that's why it's interesting to think about, like, coming from a city versus a small town, where at least the place where I lived had a very, very much a small town feel. And you had these, whether, it was through church, or maybe your pediatrician has a conversation with you, or those kind of things. So.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, you said growing up in Boston, Leigh-Ann and I are heading up that way because this past Saturday at 12:06 in the morning, our nephew was born. Nice. So we're gonna go. Yeah. We're gonna go visit Leigh-Ann's brother. They live in Milford. So, like, when you say you grew up in the city, I'd like city, or like.
Yeah. I went to Boston Public Schools, and like in the residential area, and it's not like I was in the
You're not
basement of a
downtown.
sky.
Yeah.
But yeah, in a residential section of the city. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yet, like, neighborhood still feels like a small town.
Yeah, I think as I go back now, it's changing. Kind of like the gentrification that's happening in Nashville now. Like I feel like in Boston, and that happened a little while ago. Mm-hmm. But when I was growing up, it was mainly folks who were like Irish American, or like parents or grandparents emigrated, or I guess Eastern European, like or like Italian, Polish American, stuff like that.
These pockets of culture.
Yeah, and that was very much that. I think is maybe one of the biggest, besides my family, what I miss. Like our area had this, and each neighborhood in Boston has this like cultural identity. Mm-hmm. And so really specific, and it trickles down to like the restaurants and what they have and stuff like that, which was, I think it probably came from a bad place. I'm sure at one point it was like, keep out of our area.
Turf.
I hope, it seems to have now become like a way to celebrate kind of the community.
You don't think
and things
Franklin
like
and Brentwood have that?
Not, I haven't found it yet,
That's probably true.
It's really interesting for me. Like, there seems to be a point of pride of like how far back your family goes. Like,
yeah.
Whereas I think maybe when I was growing up, you're looking to be an individual. It was like, how close to your generation did your parents or grandparents come here from somewhere else? So it's an interesting kind of flip, I think.
I think that is an interesting comparison to Nashville, because the joke around Nashville is that nobody is a native.
Yeah.
Like if you can find a Nashville native, they're like a unicorn, so you like win a prize. It's like finding the golden egg at Easter or something. But it's interesting. I think this is a town where people move to versus it sounds like Boston's a town where, for the most part, people stick around, and it's like, you said, a point of pride to see how far back you can go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's changing now, just like, it seems like everywhere, where people who are my age, as they're starting families, having to move out to the suburbs to afford somewhere. But still the parents and grandparents and stuff are hopefully in the neighborhoods and things like that. So it's,
that's cool.
But I think one thing for me, like, I'm a big fan of Dan Siegel, and he talks about like his attachment theory or kind of model is the 4 S's, right? Seen, safe, soothed, and secure. Mm-hmm. And that I got that from a lot of different people.
I love that.
Just not in an office like this.
Yeah.
Which is, now super appreciative and super lucky for that, I feel. So.
And I think I'm hearing you say this. You correct me. Maybe you got all of that, but maybe not all of it was from the same person. Mm-hmm. You just had kind of it takes a village kind of thing happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like my dad comes from a really big family. My mom does. They mostly all live in the same area, so it wasn't uncommon to see uncle or aunt or whatever just kind of out. And if you walk to the store, you see some cousins or whatever. So it was, it was a really cool way to grow up. And then, like I said, really close-knit kind of neighborhood as well. Mm-hmm. And so, that somewhat bums me out that it seems like that's becoming less and less possible as families have to move for jobs, or, I don't think you can just send someone with a couple bucks down to the corner to get some milk and bread as much anymore, for a bunch of different reasons. It's like, man, it's going to be hard to ever go back to that.
But I also think that kind of thing is more prevalent in walking cities.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
When Leigh-Ann was in New York, she was 2 blocks from her subway stop, and there was, 2 or 3 corner stores on the way there with countless, like, not countless, it's 2 blocks, but a lot of corner stores, a lot of like local coffee shops or a bodega or something where she really could, pop in and grab stuff. But here, you gotta, it's 20 minutes to wherever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there isn't really a walking.
Elite. Yeah. I've talked about that with a couple other folks that grew up away from here, mostly in the north. Like, it's not uncommon, I feel like, for somebody here to like drive 90 minutes to go somewhere for dinner they really like.
Yeah.
Whereas like, at home, if it was more than 10 minutes away, it's like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Or like, there's a smaller city called Worcester is how you pronounce it. I'm sure you've heard some jokes or some Addison about how you pronounce it. But like that was probably, I think, like maybe 45 minutes away. But they would bring bands to the little stadium they had. And like you would really have to want to go see somebody to drive all the way out. If they're not going to come to Boston, that's not worth it. Whereas here, people come from Kentucky or Alabama, no problem. Yeah.
By the way, the way you pronounce Worcester is the most Boston thing I've heard you say yet. You really lean into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no other way.
So you had this community of caring adults that were around you that I'm sure there were times where maybe mom and dad asked if they could speak into your life. I'm sure because they cared about you, sometimes they did it without being asked. And as you got older, like what was it that kind of instilled into you, oh, it's okay to get help, and I think I might like to be a person that...
Yeah. I think probably the beginning of it was the jobs that I had in high school. One that I mainly had was teaching younger kids at a hockey camp. This camp, there's this family, the O'Sullivan family, that is really well known in the area. That
O'Sullivan, okay,
it's gonna, it's all gonna make all gonna go on brand, But all the brothers and sisters are really good. But Chris was a professional hockey player, and Stephanie was on the national team. But it was teaching younger kids how to play, encouraging them, things like that, and starting to see like, all right, it's a skill. Like, we're developing skills, and there's things you can expect from people. And like, there were certain things that particularly Stephanie did. I think she was really the director of the overseer of everything. Like, she would learn everybody's name, and she would encourage everybody when they're like, hey, great job, great job, Johnny, great job, so-and-so. And it was like, wow, she memorizes everybody's name. There would be 60 kids on the ice, and she, hey, great job, so-and-so, and stuff like that. So like, oh, like, I wonder why she does that, mainly to make people feel good and seen and stuff. It's like, man, that's really cool. And so to continue to do that throughout, and then get to college. I went to college in a really small place in Western Pennsylvania, and it was a liberal arts school, and you have to take all these 100 classes or whatever. And I originally I really enjoyed English in high school. I thought maybe I can, major in this, and wasn't really what I thought it was going to be. But I was taking these psychology classes, and particularly from this one professor, and really enjoyed it. In particular, like, we got to social psychology and start to talk about these experiments or studies that went on, and got to abnormal. And I was like, man, this is really something I really enjoy and want to continue to pursue. I think probably at the same time, there was this thing that was happening in the neighborhood, like a lot of other neighborhoods all over the country, of this introduction of OxyContin and these other drugs, and really kind of getting a hook in people, like people that would come to hockey practice and be the first one there and be the last one off the ice, all of a sudden don't care. And this really big shift that took place. And so I thought I could see myself working in the recovery field, and did, they call it an internship in undergrad, but it was like I was at a treatment center, but taking attendance, and like observing
the coffee,
so it's not
next time.
It's not really that, but you get to see, and really enjoyed that, and got to see part of it. And later on ended up working in that field for about 18 months as a tech, as your pre-masters, and learned so much, and learned a lot of what was going on. But I think there was a barrier for me personally, not being in recovery, that decided, hey, maybe let's see what else is. But to have that and be like, man, what's going on? Can we help? Can I help? Those kind of things, I think, more than anything else, kind of seeing really good friends, some family members, things like that, kind of go down that path. Obviously not a big choice of their own after a certain point. And I think that was probably the thing that was like, well, I could, if I'm going to go into this world, I could work here. And even though it didn't work out, I think learned so much about trauma in particular, that it really helped get me to where I am today.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned and is transferable in the recovery field. just because you dive so deep into heart stuff and resolving past trauma, past relationship cutoff and conflicts, that I think if I ever stopped doing addictions work with clients, I think it would be, there's a lot of the stuff that I would just carry out into the next thing.
Yeah.
A lot of the lingo, a lot of the processes.
Mm-hmm.
Because even now, I mean, so much of it helps me as a person. And when I am talking to others, just as a friend, and they have questions, like I just go straight to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I know one of the guests you had before, I know you guys talked about breathing underwater. Yeah. And really just this idea of like a 12-step program would probably be good for everybody to go. You know, maybe you don't call it AA, or maybe you don't call it this, and just say, you know, self-discovery with the 12-step, but it's like, you can learn. I think anybody could benefit, you know.
Who amongst us doesn't need reminding that our lives aren't completely about us? Yeah. And that there's got to be something outside of the 6 feet of personal space around us at all times. Like, and so to be called out of that, I can't imagine somebody would object to that idea. You know, they may object to being the one who's called out of it at certain times, but you know, all of us do. Yeah.
And I think I pushed back for a long time against this idea of like, everybody's addicted to something, you know, and I think particularly in both places, the internship I did undergrad and then working at a treatment center, like, you know, there's a guy here who had his leg amputated, you know, because of, you know, complications with the detox process and things like that. Can I really say I'm addicted to bread or, you know, or shopping or whatever? But I tell you,
carbs really get me too. Man.
Yeah. But I think I listened to a podcast that Gabor Mate was on. Have you heard that guy? Really interesting. Doing a lot of good work in Western Canada, but just talking about the processes and what happens in our brain and how we escape and things like that. It really kind of like, okay, go past surface level. I can see where he's coming from and things like that. Yeah.
I think for me, one of the ways that like working in the addiction field has helped me as a person so much is that because I'm constantly helping people learn how to show up in the present in their own lives, it calls me into that. Yeah. And that's something that all of us need too, is, you know, I always call it time traveling, because if you're sitting here with me, but you're caught up worrying about something in the past, or you're busy worrying about something in the future, you know, you're not really here. And I don't think it's possible to be a time traveler like that and then have a healthy, emotional, intimate relationship. So
I agree.
To learn how to show up, as I help others to do it, it continues to call me into it. Yeah. And it's something that I think very humbled to have the chance to help people in that way. So you did an internship in the addiction field, undergrad. Yeah. And then I think you even mentioned masters too, or?
Well, so that was kind of the job in between. I know different companies call it, but I was a tech. Again, similarly, taking attendance and those kind of things, but being able to be in on the conversations and talk to counselors and talk to other people and kind of learn on the job and stuff like that.
So in
which
that
is pretty
one,
cool.
You got to pull the panel off the back and really see how it's wired.
Yeah.
Gave you a little bit more of a glimpse. Okay, do I want to?
Yeah. And the people I worked with were really cool and got to ask questions about like the reviews you do, you know, utilization review and how you write treatment goals and things like that people get clearance for another couple of days or whatever. So a real crash course in CBT if you've ever done stuff for third party payers, you know. So but I think the thing that really kind of pushed me into wanting to work with people and help people, and probably kids, was I was a part of an AmeriCorps program, which I don't think is as big in this area, but I think in some cities it's pretty big. It's like a give a year kind of thing, and you get a stipend to live off of. But I was in a second grade classroom, and the combination was a group of kids who were ESL students, and I mean literally some of them knew zero English. The other part of the group was kids who had already been marked as behavior problems. And it was like a tinderbox every day. And the best part was, I think since I didn't work for the school, I worked for this third-party agency that came in. Like, I didn't get the trainings of de-escalation or how to like separate somebody. So there was these 2 female teachers, both significantly shorter than me. And when kids would start to fight or something, they'd be like, "Step aside, Rob. Let me take care of this." It's like, oh, okay. Well, I'll just stand back and do crowd control kind of thing. But the thing that I really saw was mainly the one teacher I worked for. Her name was Miss Cronin. She worked so hard, and she came up with so much stuff every day of like, well, let's try this or let's try that, or hey, can you touch base with this kid at this point of the day because I've noticed this happens. And at one point, like we had read, you learn better when you're singing. So she asked me to go to a corner and sing nursery rhymes with the kids. And stuff. So we were doing. Somebody read something and we tried it out. You know, it's like let's try whatever we can. So to see how hard they worked, and probably wasn't like appreciate. I mean, certainly how much can a 7 to 8 year old appreciate that, but it didn't seem that way. But I was like, wow, these teachers are they're trying, really hustling and really trying to do, give their best. And that was really inspirational and really like, okay, part of that deal too is we did after school programming. And that was a little bit more of kind of what I had received through different programs of like just mentorship. Somebody say, "Hey, how you doing? You all right? Hey, I noticed that you were kind of down at recess. What's going on?" So it kind of planted the seeds of how to work with kids and stuff. Yeah. So I think that was definitely a turning point of what do I want to do, like work in this field kind of stuff. And I think maybe that comes from being from a big family and being, it was nice to say, hey, they used to call me Robbie. I think like a lot of you, "Hey, Robbie, what are you doing?" Or "What do you think? Hey, what have you been up to?" And it's like, "Oh, wow, you notice me, you see me here," that kind of thing. And it can grow from there. And I think, we're continuing to have problems with that today for young people, right? Being isolated. Nobody cares, does anybody even notice me kind of thing. And not to bring up too many things that can be argued about or things like that, but I think there's something to be said about education system as well, of just like preparing for these standardized tests and things like that. How much time does a teacher who obviously got into teaching because they're passionate about it, but can I have an individual impact on every kid every day? Yeah. So yeah, I think that had an impact, and that's kind of hopefully what I continue to try to do.
Yeah. I know, just me as a person, middle school and high school, I did really struggle with feeling invisible. And so whenever those caring adults came around that really took the time to know me, to talk to me, I remember one time, I had a youth pastor that called me up and literally said, "I got to go buy a present for my girlfriend at the mall. You want to come?" And I was like, "What?"
Yeah. Me? Do you call the right place?
You want to hang out with me? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm there. Yeah. Cool. And I thought it was going to be one of these like, "Oh, my mom must have called him and told him to talk to me." But it wasn't. Like he was just like, "Yeah, you're cool. Let's hang out." And I was like, wow, just feeling seen just was such a joy.
Yeah.
At that age. That's cool.
Yeah.
So AmeriCorps, you got this chance to really be in the mix with people who were devoting their lives to not just teaching but connecting.
Yeah, exactly.
With kids.
Yeah.
How did you land on counseling? Because I know that I think for me growing up, outside of what I saw a therapist as in movies and TV, I didn't really have any idea that was a real. I just thought, cool, Fraser Crane, cool.
I saw Good Will Hunting. I just said I want to be. I think probably it was a big part of when I had worked at the treatment center here in. So I met my girlfriend Jessica. She's from Nashville area, so I met her there, and then shortly after. Unicorn? Yeah. So then shortly after that, moved down here and got a job at a treatment center, and started taking LADAC classes while I was there. And that was interesting to see that. And then just with some learning and kind of how this works, and got the opportunity, a really great opportunity. And I think that's been a pretty interesting theme throughout my life. obviously somebody's looking out for me, because every time I go somewhere, I end up with these great. So like when I went to college in Western Pennsylvania, I ended up with this great friend group and parents that, and you know, I would go back to kids' houses for dinner and stuff like that, and got here and worked at this treatment center. And there was actually a guy from like the next town over that worked at this place, and ended up meeting this guy named John Powers, this older guy. And he was a counselor and taught me so much about different things. But the main thing was like, you know, we're not here to give the answers. You know, if somebody just comes into treatment and you say, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then they leave and, well, I'm just going to do what so-and-so said. You know, I'm just going to do what Josh says and that'll get me. You know, that's not really counseling. That's not really helping, because sooner or later, what Josh says isn't going to work. Well, I guess nothing.
Yeah.
You know,
we're more in the teach a man to fish business.
Yeah, exactly. So that, I think, really attracted me. And then when I got to this part of like, you know, I don't think I'm going to be the best fit for the recovery field, it was like, okay, what's next? And I think that's when, you know, I think I would like to do this, but maybe more on the outpatient side or those kind of things.
Nice.
So ended up, I worked for one of the big community mental health companies in the area, and within 3 guesses, I'm sure you could figure out which one it is, and did case management, and got an internship at the Refuge Center. That was 2013, and I've been there ever since, and
nice.
Doing some other stuff, whether partnerships with them or, like you mentioned, just started working with Williamson County Juvenile Services doing risk and needs assessments, which has been just another educational experience, and really cool to see how that side of things work. So, yeah, just trying to get as much experience and learn as much. And I think for sure at the end of undergrad, I was burnt out on school. Like if I had never had to sit in another classroom or seminar, I would have been super happy. Then take a couple years off, realize how much or how little money you make in the psychology world without a master's. Like, oh, okay, I think I can makeake it happen here.
I didn't even know you could do anything without the master's. I just totally could have done that instead. No, I mean, I identify with that. Although I would say I was less intentional, just because I got my undergrad, and then 13 years later is when I got my master's. And so I had a whole career in the middle there. And for me, the journey to counseling was really starting with a journey to learning who my true self was, and just kind of letting go of what had come before it, and with open hands, just kind of walking forward, and then realizing that this was something that I really, and not, I would say I really enjoy, but it's not like that I was doing it, but just sitting with people and just connecting with them and listening. And, you know, somebody asked me the $1 million, you're like, oh, if money wasn't a thing, what would you fill your time with? And I think I've always just said, like, I'll just hang out with people. Although as an introvert, I'd hang out with one people, and then another people after that, and then another people after that, you know, instead of the giant crowd. So it sounds like all throughout your story, you've got peppered in adults who were caring about you and speaking into you and lifting you up, and then you became that adult in other people's lives.
I hope so. I think at times, like, I take myself too seriously. I think probably people see me at the refuge walking around with like a really serious look, and every once in a while I'll just have to get like, hopefully more and more myself reminded, like, hey, listen to what someone has to say. Let's help out, you know. And I think pretty early on, one of my supervisors was kind of said, well, sometimes you can think about what is everybody else in this person's life saying, and how can you say it differently. And mainly working with teenagers, it's probably a lot of parents lecturing them, or there's a lot of teachers telling what they're doing wrong, or coaches, or, you know, whoever, not because they're mean, but because that's correct. And, you know, maybe I should cool it, and maybe I should listen to this guy and stuff like that. So I can go too far down back to the old black and white, all or nothing thinking, but I try to get better and better about, man, let's hear what this guy has to say, or let's hear what this young lady has to say before we just assume they're some criminal mastermind or manipulating me or something like that, you know?
Yeah. I think in my experience, nobody's ever all good. Nobody's ever all bad.
Yeah.
We all just kind of live in the gray. And I think that paired with the old, counseling trope, everybody makes sense in the context of their own story.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of helps me. And I think in general, I just have this immense gratitude and appreciation for the grace, compassion, and mercy that I was given along the way, that it helps me to snap into those moments a little, I hope so, a little sooner.
Yeah.
That when I'm with somebody else, just to go, okay, so maybe it's they don't feel safe right now. Maybe that, they're trying to protect this part of themselves, that kind of thing. So I always say just trusting the process. If I can be with somebody enough, that they'll feel safe enough to where they'll let it out.
Yeah. And it was really interesting. I think probably like a lot of people, had a lot of talk about resistance in classes and things like that. And then pretty early on after graduating, I read an article called Resistance is Dead, or titled Resistance is Dead. So it's like if somebody's not telling you something, like you said, they're not comfortable yet, they're not ready, or there's something going on where you can't just cast them aside like, oh, they're not ready. Or if they would just try, it's like, man, let me go back to basics. Why is this person not? Is it because they can't trust me? Is it because, why would somebody not want help, And I think there are probably times when we're being quote unquote manipulated because I'm not doing anything that's going to get you anywhere,
Yeah.
So someone may be trying to, but most of the time it's just like you said, what's happening in the whole picture that I'm not seeing that's causing this person to do this. Yeah. And then too, I think, the biggest part of joining, particularly, I work mostly with teens, and I think mostly with teen guys. I think usually a young lady would like to see a female counselor, and a young guy, maybe a female counselor as well, but maybe a male counselor. Really clarifying, like, hey, I'm not a third parent. This isn't the principal's office. Like, believe it or not, I'm on your side. And if you let me show you, like, if you really need something from your parents, I'm going to try to help you get it. Or if you really need something, sometimes people believe you and sometimes they don't. And you have to prove it. But to really clarify, again, going back to that idea of like, because you're in counseling doesn't mean you're this ultra bad kid.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean like you're beyond all hope. It's like, hey, let's work this out. Let's figure out what's going on,
Well, something that I say to my addiction clients is you're not a bad person who's trying to become good. You're a sick person who's trying to become well. So, like, just to try to do a little reframe of, like, and on top of that, one thing I always try to tell them is, like, I'm not in authority over you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not your boss. I'm not a judge. I'm not a cop. I don't have the ability to, like, make rulings. I'm just somebody that wants to walk beside you down this road.
Yeah.
So if we can just get to know each other well enough, there are going to be times where I'm going to need to challenge you on some stuff.
Sure.
What I'd like to do is to try to earn your trust enough to be able to do that. And even in those times, I was just telling somebody the other day, I don't make requests and use smoke and mirrors. So if I'm going to ask you to do something, I'm going to tell you why I'm asking you.
Yeah.
It's not just just trust me. Like,
yeah, I think a couple times people have been like, what are you really asking? I'm like, I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm probably asking you what I'm asking you. Or a couple times I've gotten credit like, oh, you connected this, and this. You're good. I'm like, yeah, I guess I did.
I know, yeah. Usually in those situations, I'm like, you're right, I did.
I didn't have this big scheme to circle around the goal here or anything. But one of the things, I think maybe the main things I picked up in working in recovery, I would assume this is a solution-focused kind of thing, but it's just starting from, if you're alive, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
And the further you get past that, you're doing a bunch of stuff right. And let's focus on, amplifying those things versus just getting rid of the negatives.
Yeah, I mean, that's highlighting resilience. And I think also recognizing that a lot of people in addiction developed these things as coping strategies or survival skills. So, like, there's a book called Prisoner of Another War that is a trauma resolution kind of thing. And it talks about how if you look at trauma through the lens of like wounded child, healthy adult, and survivor, like there's some kind of attachment injury that happened in the past that created not created, but like froze the wounded child where they were. And then I'm thinking of like some kind of sci-fi something where like out of the wounded child, the survivor springs forth to protect it.
Yeah.
And so it's one of these where like, okay, so you developed this thing to keep yourself alive for this long and it's worked.
Mm-hmm.
I would invite you to know that you don't have to employ the same technique anymore. And I'm going to help you develop new things.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the further down you get, I've even had people from the perspective of the wounded child write a letter to the survivor, from the perspective of the survivor to the wounded child, and from the perspective of the healthy adult, write a letter to both.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful thing, you know, but what you're saying is right. If they're alive, something's worked.
Something, you know, and we can build off of that thing.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times it's easy to get lost in, I'm just some kind of piece of crap that, you know, well, no, you're not. I mean, you're here. And, you know, sometimes in the middle of a session, I'll just start asking people like, what'd you do this past week you loved?
Yeah.
Just in a sense to keep trying to draw those things out. I mentioned to somebody the other day, negative recovery and positive recovery. At the very beginning, negative recovery, you just start by, okay, cool, you're in for alcoholism. We got to get you off the bottle.
Yeah.
You know, because in order to get to your heart, we got to get some sobriety. In order to get some sobriety, we got to get to your heart. So we're just going to pick one. That's going to be, can we get you 24 hours without a drink? And then after you get a little bit of that negative recovery going, you can make a turn into positive, and you can start adding stuff into a person's life. And it's really to help draw out the true self.
Yeah.
What is it that makes Rob more Rob? What is it that makes Josh more Josh? Yeah. So like if I want to take guitar lessons, or if I want to, I don't know, start hiking, or if I want to take a pottery class, like that kind of stuff seems like, I don't know if that's really clinical recovery kind of, but it is, because you're trying to help draw out the person's heart, you know, which is this, it's highlighting that stuff that's in them. Yeah. Amy Alexander has that beautiful line about walking a client into a library and reintroducing them to the volumes of themselves that they've left behind. Yeah. And it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, I really like, and I'll use it quite a bit. I think it's Berg is the author, but talks about we're looking for the presence of a solution, not the absence of a problem. Yeah. Right? Because if you just do first aid, or I think, you know, probably some people might call that the negative part, like the old thing being a dry drunk, you just got rid of, but you still have all this, you know, all these things that go on that make you upset. Yeah. Yeah. Are you fully living, or however you want to call it? Well, that's the difference between
being dry and being sober. Yeah. Like, because people can get dry on their own. They can white knuckle it for X amount of time. But if you want to get sober, it's not just about the denial of the vice. Yeah. But it's about the re-engagement of the heart, and, you know, how do I grow as a person to understand what's happening inside of me, so that I can also connect with other people.
Yeah. I think the thing that I've found that, you know, I think when I'm working with a client, I don't know what is like common knowledge. I don't know what's like
tough for us to tell. What does everybody know? Time,
But one thing that's come up more and more is like, most of life, I would say, is some kind of skill. Right? You have to learn how to do a lot of, like, you know, we're born, we know how to breathe, we know how to do all this stuff, but it's like nobody is born the best version of themselves, right? And it's not that everybody else has it way easier. You know, some people obviously are born a couple steps ahead, some behind, but a lot of like great books lately, like I know we talked about Outliers before this, and like talent is overrated, and a lot of these great things, like the people who do the best, like probably work the hardest, you know, and a lot of talent can get you somewhere. But I think it's really similar with, like, I know you're a big fan and proponent of Voice of the Heart. Like, we have these feelings, is what we do with them. Yeah. And like everybody has some level of anxiety before a performance or before something. It's like, you know, it's not, and I think the biggest part with working with teens, the ideal version, I think most young people, if I came in and said, hey, what would you like? They would say, I just don't want to feel bad. It's like, I hate to break it to you. You're going to feel bad, but it's what we do with it. And that, I would say, is a skill. And it's something that, you know, besides maybe someone who has some organic issues or something, you know, some developmental issues, we can all do to one degree or another.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and you can develop that skill. Maybe you won't be the best in the world, but you'll have this. Yeah, exactly.
But just like anything else, if you practice enough, you'll increase in that skill.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the coolest things. I remember there was a documentary about Bruce Springsteen's album, Darkness at the Edge of Town. And it was this big thing, but one thing he talked about, I think it was just one song. He had one of those marble notebooks that was full of lyrics of this one song. And so I would think, man, Bruce Springsteen walks in the room, sits down, writes out this chorus and a couple of verses, and boom, he's going to lunch. But if that guy's doing that much, and then nowadays with social media, you see how much people are training in the off season. You see the best people in business are waking up earlier and going to bed later. Like, nobody's really, I'm sure they're out there, these, really virtuosos that are just born this way. But the majority of us and the majority of people who are successful at whatever, we're developing skills.
But even the virtuosos, like I knew a guy when I was living in Southern California. His name's Dom, and he came from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
He showed up and was already an incredible piano player, and somebody gave him their acoustic guitar. Like, just, I don't need it anymore, you take it. And within a month or two was a better guitar player than I was, which at the time I was like 12 years in. And he was better than that. And so I remember later on, a year or two later, asking him, man, what is it about you? It's just so natural that you just pick something up and you're the best at it and all that. And he said, well, my parents started having me trained in classical piano when I was 2. And so he had studied music theory at that point for something like 20 years. And he began studying classical opera singing when he was in his teens. And just had all of this knowledge of music so that when he picked up an instrument, it wasn't the same as me starting dry on something. He had all this wealth of stuff already, and it was just a matter of maybe learning the mechanics of it, but he knew the musical side of it. And I think I mentioned this on another episode, this Charles Duhigg book that I just read. I always forget the name, gosh, Stronger, Better, Faster, or something like that. It's the one after The Power of Habit, but he talked about reading a study where they allowed or asked elementary school kids to take a test. And then after the test, they praised the kids in different ways. And so one group, they said, oh, I'm so proud of you. You're so smart. And then another group, they said, oh, I'm so proud of you. You worked so hard. And what they found was the kids who were constantly told they're smart ended up scoring lower because they ended up associating smarts with something that you were either born with or didn't.
It's a fixed versus a growth mindset, right?
And so if you were told that you were smart but you didn't score as high the next time, then they began to doubt that they really had it because they didn't do anything to get it. Versus the kids that were told, you worked so hard, great job. They began to associate effort with progress. And it was just this, it was this beautiful thing of, wow, because I remember as a kid thinking, I couldn't have put it into words, but just thinking like, okay, so those kids that sit on that side of the room are clearly, they're the ones that are able to do this a lot easier. And I even remember in my interview for grad school at Trevecca, being out 13 years, I was sitting with 2 professors, both doctors, and at some point, one of them said, oh, okay, I see that your undergrad grades are really low and your test scores were low too. And the other one interrupted him and said, actually, no, his test scores are really high. Because I had taken the MAT to get into it. And, whole time I'm taking it thinking, all right, I'm going to barely squeak by on this thing. But I didn't. I got really high. And I don't know why. But then they said to me, hey, we're going to have to let you in under conditional acceptance because of your grades in your undergrad, which was 13 years prior. And I said, I understand that. I said, I just want to let you know, this is something that I really believe that I want to do. And there might be people in the program that are going to get higher grades than me, but you're not going to have anybody that's going to work harder. I will work the hardest in this program.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you just tell me what I need to do and point me in the right direction, and I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so for me, at the end of that first semester, getting that letter that said I was no longer on conditional whatever, like that was just this giant moment of victory that I don't think even my undergrad self, certainly not my high school self, would have ever believed could have been possible.
This was down the road, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a really, I know the production company, I guess, or whatever, but it's called RSA Animate, and it's one of those videos that have like, you just see the hand and the marker and they're drawing on a whiteboard. But the lady's name is Dweck, Dweck, and I believe she came up with that fixed first growth mindset. And in that video, they talk about that study and what it does. But outside of counseling, I continue to coach hockey, just something I really love to do, and got to go to USA hockey training over the summer, or last summer, and they talked about there's a certain point where young athletes are just quitting, and it's generally like, if I remember correctly, it's like between 14 and 16. You know, the time when kids need something more than ever. You know, you don't really need to be off the street when you're 6 or 8. When you're in high school, you should
also,
probably.
what are you doing on the street when you're 6 or 8? Like, come inside.
Yeah, we should be keeping kids in sports until, you know, they're going off to college or whatever. And one of the things they mentioned is when kids are really young, we're emphasizing like, hey, you got 5 goals today. Like, I'm so proud of you and stuff like that. And we're really emphasizing the outcome, which we should be doing more of like, you know what? I saw what you did out there and maybe other people didn't notice, but you worked so hard and I'm so proud of you.
The process.
Like, yeah. Oh, yeah. And emphasizing that. So that's when people are like, people get upset about not having score at the games or whatever. It's like, well, you know, the people who are competitive are going to be competitive anyway and we'll know what the scores are. But it's really not about the final score of the game. It's how we're talking to each athlete or how we're talking to our son or daughter. Like, you know what? I can tell how hard you tried. Or, you know what? I know you've had a bad day and you did the best you could at school or at this or at that.
Or something like maybe that's even an opportunity to teach them how to handle a bad day.
Yeah,
hey, I know you had a bad day, but I'm really proud of you because you kept trying.
Yeah, exactly. You kept getting up and kept going. Versus, you know, and that's why we're so good at the 8 and under or 10 and under or whatever. And then you step up in competition, particularly like you get to high school. All of a sudden, you're a 14-year-old freshman. You're playing an 18-year-old man. You're not going to be the best. And have you developed that resilience to be able to be the worst on the team and still say, you know, I did all right. Or, you know what, I'm going to come back tomorrow. Yeah. And I think a lot of kids are just like, I'm not the best anymore. Like, oh, this isn't fun. Let's get in. Unfortunately, there's just not, you can't start playing baseball in 9th grade and mix it. You know, it's like there's not a whole lot of other options.
Yeah,
then,
I'd like to blame my lack of athletic ability on that.
Yeah.
Just, you know.
You're just before your time.
I got the desire too late in time and I didn't have the coordination or the skill.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, cool. I guess I'll do this other thing. So taking a peek into your story and seeing how much of it was as a kid having adults step in, it's a great way to transition into our movie.
Yeah.
What did you bring?
An all-time favorite of mine, Stand By Me.
Stand By Me.
Yeah, 1986. So
86. Yeah. Holy cow. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
When you brought up this movie, I was like, the only thing I thought of was the barf scene.
Yeah.
The absolute thing, which is probably because I saw it when I was a kid, which I cannot think of how I would have, like, this is not one that mom and dad would have taken me to.
Yeah.
It's not one that I could think any friend would have been able to pull out at their, I don't know how I saw it.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing it as a kid because obviously the barf scene, like that sticks out. And there's just different, as Leigh-Ann and I were watching it the other night, you know, you get these like bursts of, oh, I know what scene's coming next or something like that. You're really kind of fog in the headlights kind of thing. But what was it about this movie?
I think, as I was kind of thinking through, I think this movie, I think there's a nostalgia piece. But I think like it really grew with me and a lot of, so like when I first saw it, and I similarly don't remember the first time I saw it, but thought about the barf scene, thought about the leeches, thought about the train. The leech thing reminds me, like, it wasn't a meme because it was just like a picture and a caption, but it was something along the lines of, when I was a kid, I thought quicksand was going to be a lot bigger of a problem.
Yeah, it's
and
in
when
every cartoon.
Yeah, when I was a kid and watched this, I thought leeches were going to be a huge deal. I don't think I've seen a leech in real life ever. But
I said something to Leigh-Ann the other night, similar, where I was like, I understood that in my adulthood, I would encounter many more women tied up with rope on train tracks
right.
than
Just
I
waiting for me to be a hero.
Yeah, never seen one.
Yeah.
What is the thing?
So I think there was that part that was like, I saw this as a kid, and I think that's where I think it would stay in the realm. Like Goonies is one, Sandlot is one, this nostalgia. But I think this story for me goes past that. And when I saw it again later in life, it was like, I remember being a kid, and that line that's at the end, like I never had any other friends like I did when I was 12. Like, Jesus, does anybody?
Yeah,
it's like that. And then I think again when I rewatched it through the lens of like a counselor early in his career, like, you start to notice these other things, and maybe a little attachment or maybe a little trauma or identity, those kind of things. So it's really like grown with me. And then, it's so interesting. Like I would say some of my favorite movies are Stephen King movies, but not what you think of as a Stephen King movie.
Yeah.
The scary, because like
Green
this one,
Mile.
Green Mile,
Shawshank.
Exactly. I would say those three. Like, man, I love those. You really wouldn't think like Stephen King right off the bat or something, And it's interesting. The book that this comes from is called Different Seasons, I think different. And so there's these 4 stories in it that go with spring, summer, fall, winter. And Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption are in there. That became Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, wow.
The Body's in there, which became Stand By Me. Apt Pupil is in there, which became a movie the same name. And then there's another one. Wait,
that was Stephen King?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's the one with Ian McKellen, and he's the Nazi.
The teacher that's a Nazi, yeah. Wow. And then there's a 4th one, I guess maybe there'll be a movie made on it. It's called The Breathing Method. But those 3 came all from this book that, like, I had to, like, search a couple different Google searches and then look up at the library, like, where is this all from? Where can I get it kind of thing? Yeah.
It's interesting, kind of relating to what we were saying before with Stephen King. I would, if you enjoy reading him at all, I would highly recommend his book called On Writing.
Yeah.
Just because it's like half autobiography, half his process and kind of stories on how he conceived some of these characters and stuff. But he's got this discipline, talk about hard work, where every day he gets up at the same time, pours a cup of coffee, sits in the same place, and will not get up until 2,000 words have been typed.
Yeah.
Like, even if they're crap, like 2,000 words have to be typed before he gets up. And you look at his body of work. I mean, I don't even know how high those books would stack, because it's just so much.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the overwhelming majority of it's good.
Yeah.
And he talks about On Writing, learning how to kill your babies, just in the reference to being a good editor.
Yeah, yeah.
And he talked about having to have that breakthrough of just writing and giving yourself permission for it to be garbage.
Yeah.
Because in writing garbage, you'll find gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think similarly, like, I believe it's Jerry Seinfeld talk about writing as well. Like, writer's block shouldn't be as big of an excuse. And I've never tried to write anything, so easy for me to say. But, like, I think he, in a funny way, kind of says, like, a construction worker doesn't have construction block.
True.
These other jobs, you can't just, I just can't get, you need to go and do it. Maybe, like you said, it's not all going to be gold. Maybe like 10% of it's gold, but you got to put the work in.
Yeah. Same thing with this. Like, every podcast episode I record is 7 hours long, and then I edit it down to, the part that, Seinfeld had that. Who else? I was just thinking of somebody else when you were mentioning that. It takes work, and King's done a lot of it. So you've got this nostalgia factor, and then later on you're picking up on all this stuff now that you got some training under your belt.
And I think the other company that came to mind when I was thinking about that is Pixar. I think Pixar is like really great at, like, there's something for the kids and then there's something for adults, right? Like, we're having these kind of layered kind of things.
Also, with them, I don't think the kids spot the adult stuff.
I don't think so.
And I think sometimes it takes a couple passes for the adults to spot, like, or to let themselves go back to the kid stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, I know a couple of people that couldn't, once they saw the first 10 minutes of Up, they were done.
Oh,
they
man.
didn't keep going, And the latest one for me is Coco. Like,
oh man, that's a heavy duty. I mean, talk about like existential thoughts and stuff. Like,
maybe that's
did
the one I'll
anybody
do
think
for,
of me? Yeah,
for my episode. Like, maybe that's what I'll do is Coco, because I was a wreck.
Yeah,
I mean,
whenever it came on, I don't know if it was on demand or on Netflix. Maybe Jessica and I watched it, and like halfway through, like, what do we get ourselves into here? You know?
Because that was one where when the trailer came out, I saw it and I was like, I'm good. I don't need to watch that. You know, and it was on Netflix. When we saw it on Netflix.
Yeah.
And we hit play on that, like, oh man.
Yeah.
Anytime the song came up, I was just, and then after that, probably for the next month, I would pull up the clip on YouTube of the song. Cry no matter where I was
Remember
at.
Me song?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would cry no matter I mean, in line at the bank.
Yeah.
In line at the grocery store. Like, I mean, just anywhere, full on, ugly, tear-stained face cry. So what... We talked about the nostalgia part. Like, tell me about, you know, some stuff that you're seeing. You work a lot with young men. You got some clinical training under your belt. What is some stuff that you're spotting in this movie?
So I think in particular, it's like now, I mean, just like everybody else, you know, everybody's reading about trauma, and you need to have trauma-informed practices and things like that. So starting to see, like, there's 4 main characters. So it's Gordy, Chris, Vern, and then Teddy. And he talks a little bit about each, but it's really the story of Gordy, and Chris is his best friend.
So, and mainly Gordy in the movie's the narrator. Is it the same in the book? Or is there a narrator in the book?
I remember, so one thing to mention that like takes it over the top that I found out doing this, Rob Reiner was the director of this, which was in this period of like unbelievable movies. So a couple years before that, directed This Is Spinal Tap. The next year directed The Princess Bride. Like everything this guy touched was unbelievable.
He's also done When Harry Met Sally. I mean, he's
Misery, which was the other side of Stephen King, right?
Which I learned much later on, and I'd seen it so much just to know it was him. But he was the son-in-law in All in the Family.
Yeah, Meathead. Right?
Yeah,
hey, Meathead.
Yeah, and you know that guy has gone on to have this kind of run. That's great.
I think when he got rid of the mustache, he took it to the next level. You know, he just kind of looked like a goof.
He grew that beard that's thick right here, and then it gets kind of thin on the side there. Yeah.
But he talks about a turning point for him was making Gordy, or they call him Gordo, a bunch of the main character, and it's really about him. And there's a couple key differences from the novella. One at the end. I've listened to your podcast. I know there's an understood spoilers alert here.
Yeah,
but,
you know what? Hey guys, the movie came out in '86.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Yeah. There's one key part at the end where there's this big standoff between the 4 young guys and this gang called the Cobras,
which one of their big brothers is in.
Exactly. Gordy has the gun out and stops him. So in the book, it's different. Chris has the gun and asks Gordy to stay with him. And so you can see, like, they made these kind of a couple of that and a couple other subtle changes to make it really about Gordy and his family and how he sees other people. And really, it's I've read semi-autobiographical, just Stephen King seeing himself as a young storyteller and things like that, and really enjoyed how it came out and stuff like that.
Wow. That reminds me, I saw this interview with Bradley Cooper where he talked about A Star Is Born and his version being the 4th iteration of that, you know, whatever one in the 20s, then the Judy Garland one, then the Barbara Streisand one. And he said he took a few things and changed them in his, because he said he wanted to really lean in on it being about family and about it being relationships and not just a career trajectory.
Yeah.
And it seems like from what you're saying that, you know, Rob Reiner and whoever wrote the script, they were really kind of honing in on, let's kind of go a little more relationship and kind of system heavy on this than just conflict.
So there's these 4 boys that the story focuses around. Vern is kind of he's just like a klutz,
there for
kind
it.
of.
Yeah.
And stuff. So he's a little different. But the other 3,
I thought Chunk from Goonies. That's who he reminded me of.
Kind of like that, right? Yeah. The other 3 have all experienced these really tough things. So it opens, talks about Teddy, Teddy's dad, we presume, has some form of PTSD or whatever
and
it was being called.
This is in the 50s?
I believe in the book it's set in 1960.
Okay.
So, and he talks about his dad storming the beach at Normandy. His dad, in a fit of rage, had held his head down to a stove and burnt his ear off and messed up with the side of his head. Chris Chambers comes from a family which everybody says is no good. And there's a really big turning point where he talks about, I wish I could just go somewhere where nobody knew me. Nobody knew my family, and I could just have a fresh start. And then Gordy, his brother, who's played by John Cusack, had died 4 months earlier in a car accident. And parents are still obviously grieving. And even in some flashback scenes, we see his brother was the favorite, and he was kind of... I mean, it's weird to say someone's a black sheep when there's only two, but he was just like, his brother was all-American, and he was kind of, hey, why don't you be more like your big brother?
Well, if you look at, like, Virginia Satir talks about family roles, and his brother would have been the hero in the family, and he would have been the invisible child. Yeah. It wasn't like his parents were consciously saying you don't matter, but subconsciously they really
sending
were.
These messages, right?
Yeah. And then on top of that, I was really struck with how intentional and caring his brother was towards him in the flashbacks. And so you see, it really wasn't just the parents losing somebody, but in his brother, he really lost somebody who he felt seen by. Like you were saying in your story, he felt seen by him. Yeah. I mean, you know, they had a flashback at the dinner table where the dad was just praising the brother for some game that had just happened.
Hey, there's going to be scouts there tomorrow. Are you ready? It's going to be great.
And his brother just out of nowhere brings up like, hey, Gordy wrote this story that I think is really good. Yeah. And he's just trying to be like, hey, my kid brother is doing this great stuff. You guys like, look at that.
Yeah.
You know.
And so it's interesting. There's these three things, right? And I would say they're all probably equally bad, all equally impactful on these young guys, but way different. Like between the three boys, but all kind of lead them to be this little crew, this little foursome that kind of stick together at least for this period, and you know, they're cool with each other. They don't need anybody else.
I read this thing on so I've developed a habit when Leigh-Ann and I sit down and watch the movie, I'll pull up the IMDb page and go to the trivia section just to see like little facts about and they were saying that during the campfire scene. So I guess like brief synopsis of the story without walking through the whole thing. Beginning of the movie, the four boys are friends. Vern buried a jar of pennies. A quart jar of pennies. Yeah, underneath his porch and had a treasure map that led to it. Well, his mom cleaned out his room and threw away the map. So he has been spending all day after
9
school.
months, right?
Yeah. And it shows under the porch and there's like all these holes because he's trying to find it. So he's under the porch. He hears his big brother and somebody else talk about this kid in the town who had died. Yeah, Ray Brower. They never found his body, and his brother and the other kid found the body. And so Vern hears this, and he goes to the other three boys, hey, we're going to go find the dead body and be heroes. You know? So it's this, you know, if you look at story structure, this call out of where they're at into adventure, which is going to then like change them, and they will go... so somebody told me the difference between an adventure and an epic is with an adventure, you end up leaving and never coming back. With an epic, you leave and you change and you come back. Yeah,
because at the end they come back and talk about how the town felt smaller.
Yeah. Which, you know, did you ever get a chance to vote when you lived in Boston? So did you have to go back to your elementary school?
It was like the local fireman's hall.
Oh, okay. Yeah. When I first started voting, I went to the elementary school I went to, which I just found out this past Christmas closed, and I am shook. But I remember...
I mean, we don't need education anymore. Like, did it get close to be like upgraded or just like...
they built a new school.
I gotcha.
So like they were saying that this one wasn't big enough to handle the influx. But I remember walking through as an 18 or 19-year-old and thinking, this is a tiny place. Like, and not connecting, I was 7 or 8 and, you know, that kind of thing. So they launch out to go find this body. Unbeknownst to them, there is a group which Vern's Chris's big brother is in.
And Vern's as well, I think.
Oh, yeah.
He's a less, so Chris's big brother.
Whose name is Eyeball.
Yeah. And Kiefer Sutherland is like the head of this little gang.
Bleached
His
hair and
name's
all.
Ace, yeah.
Yeah.
And, they're kind of there to be kind of protagonists, I think, in this kind of a race against. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's like a race between the two. They're kind of happening in parallel, and the brothers can keep it to themselves because they boosted a car. And if the gang leader finds out that they boosted a car without telling them, they're going to get in trouble or something like that. And so they end up telling, and then it's kind of a race where the 4 boys are walking down the train tracks, and these other 2 have cars, but they have like a day and a half head start for the boys.
And really, in both cases, they want to find the body so that they can be heroes and be famous and that kind of thing. So
you talked about, like, earlier, things make sense in the whole picture. There's this concept, the essence of adolescence. Have you heard that? In essence, each thing stands for something. Why do teens do it? And it's emotional spark, social engagement, novelty, and creative expression. So I don't know what the creative expression would be, but all those other things of like, why would 4 boys go see a dead body when they would just tell somebody? Well, because it's exciting. It's new. They're doing it together.
It's independent. They're doing it on their own. Yeah. But the trivia thing, it said there's a scene where they're all around a campfire. So they'd like bedded down for the night, and they're each taking turns on watch. And while they're doing that, holding a 45, which one of them snuck out of their dad's house. And every time they're on watch, they are doing the thing that like a kid will do, where their back's against a tree, their feet are up against their butt, and their arms are folded on their knees, and they're still holding the gun, and it's like pointing at all the other kids. Which
so everybody except Vern, because Vern's like just so skittish that every time there's a little thing, he's whipping around.
Which that's probably a good indication that I'm into adulthood, as I'm watching that going like, oh my gosh, you'll shoot your eye out, kid. Which is a whole nother movie.
Yeah.
But in the trivia thing in IMDb, it said that Rob Reiner, when they were filming the scene, he was working with River Phoenix, who was Chris, and he knew, he's going to be able to do a lot more. He's not quite getting there. So he like pulled him aside and said, I want you to think about and use a time in your life when you felt really let down by an adult. And then the result was the take that they used where he just breaks down crying, like deep body sobs. And they said that after they did that take, that he had to be taken from the set to a trailer, and Rob Reiner had to sit with him and comfort him because he got so emotional from that.
And it's a really key point in that idea of like, I think some people might call it like little T trauma, just you're no good, and that over and over. He tells a story there with, again, it's really the story of these 2 guys, Gordo and Chris. He's no good. He's a thief, and you come to find this story that he stole the milk money at school. And he tells Gordo, you know what? I did steal it, but I brought it back. And I gave it to this teacher. He said
something like, they never even asked me if I stole it. And then Gordo's like, well, did you?
He says, yeah, of course I did. But he gave it back to this lady, and since it was him, they would all take her side, and she just happens to have like a new dress the next Monday and told everybody that he stole it. And you can see it's just like really pointing like, you're no good. No one's going to believe you. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And he feels like she took advantage because he gave the money back and she used it to buy.
She saw her opportunity, yeah. And what does that say to a young person? No one's going to believe you. Don't even bother.
And that you can't trust.
Yeah. You can't trust adults.
People.
Yeah. And the one thing, so we can say a lot of profanity, a lot of, heavy, but he's in that moment, he's crying, he looks up to Gordo, and in different words, but he says, I guess me crying, that just makes me soft, and you can say, no, man, no, that's, just that, let me put this out there. And there's these different things throughout, like, on the flip side, when they're walking down the train tracks, Gordo asks Chris, am I weird? And he goes, yeah, of course you are,
Yeah.
These little ways.
And he says, but we all are.
Yeah.
And it's not
what makes us a part of this crew.
It's like this acknowledgement of, you got this weirdness in you, but every one of us does. And so he does it in a way that doesn't push Gordy away. It actually pulls him in more and says, because you're weird, you're with us.
And I think the direction stuff is unbelievable, but while they're having this really serious conversation, and I believe that flows to like hey, we're going to junior high next year, and you're going to be in the college prep classes, and we're going to be in the shop classes. And he's saying, no, I don't want to be like that. I want to be a writer. People make fun of me, that kind of stuff. I want to be with you guys. And he's saying, no, we're just going to drag you down. They have this really serious conversation. It swaps to the other two, Teddy and Vern, and they're having an argument about who would win, Mighty Mouse or Superman. And the resolution is, well, Mighty Mouse is a cartoon and Superman's real, so obviously Superman would win.
Superman's a real person. Yeah.
So it's a really good way of like, oh, yeah, they're still kids. And this is like kind of levity stuff. It was really good.
There's several parts in the movie that I thought, I never imagined it was going to be this like heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But like in their journey, they begin to tell a legend of a dog that's at a junkyard and how the dog has been trained not just to sick people, but to sick certain parts of the people. And so, yes, the language is rough in the movie, but if I'm thinking back to being 10, 11, 12, like that age, I think using the kind of language that they used made you at least feel like you were trying to be a grown-up.
Yeah,
like,
when the parents aren't around, let me show you this word that I learned or something.
Yeah, you had this idea that grown-ups say these things, and so if you say them, you're being a grown-up.
And not just say them every other word.
Yeah, yeah. And so they go to this junkyard. I think they wanted to fill up water or something like that.
So they go there. They know there's clean water. They know it's closed until 2 or something. And there's a convenience store, which one of the reasons I really like this and watch it with a couple buddies, particularly at college, there's just these funny things they do. And so to figure out who goes to the convenience store, they all flip a coin, and the odd man goes to gets it. And I think they all get heads. Tails.
Yeah.
And then Vern goes, oh man, that's a goocher, which is like, that's bad luck. That's like a jinx or something. But just what a great, that's a goocher. And he's like really into it. But he ends up and goes to get, some Cokes and some sandwich meat. And he must get sausages or something because that's what they make over the fire that night. But when he comes back, everybody's gone and they're hopping over the fence and there's Chopper and there's the guy who owns it. And it's this, again, one of those scenes as a young person, it's like this race scene to get out and hop the fence.
Yeah. It reminds me of the part in The Sandlot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With the dog.
Yeah. The huge, supposedly huge dog that, it's pretty big, but not what they said.
And in this one, it looked like it was just, I don't even, like some kind of shepherd or something. Up to your shins
or something, maybe, or something like that, yeah. But the guy catches up with them. He's on one side of the fence and they're on the other. And he says, I know all you guys. And he really sticks it to Teddy. I'm going to call all your dads except your dad because he's in a loony bin. And he's crazier than this and that. And Teddy has made it clear he's really sensitive throughout the movie and really looks up to his dad. He stormed the beach at Normandy. And he's wearing a dog tag throughout. I assume it's his dad's. And really gets him worked out. And say, my dad stormed the beach at Normandy. What did you ever do? And on and on and on. And they're walking away, and Teddy's really torn up. He was, I forget what he says, but he was making fun of my dad, and he's so torn up. And the narrator comes in, the voice of Gordy, and says, I couldn't understand. Teddy's dad almost killed him, and he was so torn up about this. And my dad hadn't touched me since I was 3, and I couldn't care less about him. And you can see, like, it was probably cold between Gordy and his parents long before his brother. Whereas Teddy probably had these windows of probably some good time. He even talks about, like, he knows where to go to find the boy because he and his dad had gone fishing there. And so they had these times where stuff was good and he could look up to him. So he had these intermittent positive things and at least this one big thing, and they talk about fits of rage.
Yeah.
Though I listened to a couple podcasts to get ready, and there was 2 things that really bummed me out. One was, the thought was, going back to the jar of pennies, that Vern's older brother probably had found it, and he was looking for something, which I was like, no. And then the other thing was, there's some look that the junkyard owner gives that makes him think Teddy's dad probably wasn't in Normandy. I didn't really see it. I hope it's, but with the dog tags, with other stuff, I think he at least was in the service.
Yeah.
So I'm going to choose to...
Or maybe
to believe he was,
Or maybe he was like a cook. Like maybe he was there, but he wasn't one of the guys,
But either way, this is obviously a hero of Teddy when he's in his right mind.
And I was so struck by, like, first off, I mean, Teddy's not innocent. He is calling the junkyard owner fat, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. I was so shocked how personal that guy made it with those kids. Like, he was like, and not just a Teddy. I mean, certainly he went in deeper on Teddy, but like he called out stuff about Chris. He called out stuff about, well, with Gordy, he was like, oh yeah, and your brother died. So he was kind of like, so you're good. You get a pass, you know. But
and I think that's a thought that I had throughout was like, if these 4 guys say were arrested for trespassing then, or they're all just brought in for something, there's probably forgiveness for Gordy because he's in grief. Chris probably gets arrested or whatever because who his family is. And maybe Teddy gets the benefit of the doubt, but probably, hey, his dad's bad, so he's probably bad too. So you can see that there's this differential of, and I would say probably still exists today, what's acceptable bad or what's acceptable having been affected by these things, and maybe what's not.
Do you think there's like an element of privilege in that too? Because I can't help but think about how all 4 kids are white. It is the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
And I think with Gordy, the grief thing spot on. I think with Chris, more than likely his big brothers and dad had gotten into stuff. So yeah, there's the family element, but he also did steal the milk money. So it's not even like he's just a victim of his family. Well,
so I think in that one really great pivotal scene where he's crying to Gordy, he talks about, I wish I was like one of those people up on the hill or up on the view or whatever they say. So you can see like they're probably in the lower class of the school or something like that. Yeah, I know you may be familiar with this. There's some kind of test that you watch a movie and you can rate it based on like how many women are in it.
The Bechdel test. Yeah. It's not that it's like a series of 5 questions. I was actually telling Leigh-Ann about this. We were walking Miller the other night, and it mainly has to do with, does this female character have agency over their own story, or are they just kind of there?
So there's only 2 women in this whole movie. The mom in the flashbacks, and then they shoot the gun early on because Chris says, oh, it's not loaded, so he shoots it and goes off, and a waitress comes out and screams at them. And it's other than, there's no other women, and then it's only white kids in it.
Yeah.
You know? So it's in a silo, I guess you could call it. You know, it's hard
and I
to,
mean,
you know.
it does seem like, certainly this is not an autobiographical movie about Stephen King, but it's set in Maine. Castle Rock is the town in every single...
So interesting, if you catch in the beginning, the movie is set in Castle Rock, Oregon.
Oh.
And I think this is early on. Now we come to know, like, even they had that series on Amazon, right? Or that was
Hulu, maybe Hulu.
Something. That's Castle Rock, and everything else is set in Castle Rock.
Well, and
Maine.
his production company's called Castle Rock, so like something about that name is.
And what I heard was later on they say Chris became a lawyer in Portland, and there is a Portland, Maine. But when you think Portland, you think Portland, Oregon.
Yeah. But I mean, it kind of makes me wonder, you know, is this just an example of a guy who his formative years were the 50s and 60s and probably lived in a place where it was a bunch of, you know, people that looked just like him.
Yeah.
You know, and I wonder, you know, where we're at as a culture today, we're striving for inclusivity because we've had exclusivity for so long, you know, and we look back at, and, you know, we mentioned like language and stuff before. This is a very quintessential 80s movie. Yeah. Like, it's got a spirit of the Goonies in it, but it's harder than that. And I don't remember when Temple of Doom came out, but Temple of Doom was what brought PG-13. Like, previous to Temple of Doom, you had PG, which Jaws was, and Jaws has like nudity at the beginning and, you know, people getting eaten by a shark. And then you had like R, and if you were an R-rated movie before Temple of Doom, like, you were, you know, it was bad, you know, kind of thing. So it makes me, you know, kind of look at it and go, this is a very time specific you know, movie, and yet in it you have these young men that are wrestling with deep questions of identity. And I think Chris's moment at the campfire where he just wants to get away because I think for him, it's not that he doesn't feel known.
Mm-hmm.
He feels known, but not truly known.
Yeah.
Like he feels like people are like, oh no, I know you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's crying out, no, that's not me. That's not
Yeah.
me. I want
Yeah.
a fair shake. I want to get a chance to get away with this. Whereas Gordy, on the other hand, feels completely unknown by the people
Mm-hmm.
he cares the most about.
Yeah.
And it's, I was saying before we started recording that, it reminds me, I had a friend when I was growing up who, my dad left our family a few times, and really for the last time sophomore year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
So it was mom and me and my brother. And this friend that I had, his family was still together, mom, dad, sister. And we did everything together. We hung out
Mm-hmm.
together all the time. And any time that we were going to get together, it was a big thing. I'd always call him up, hey, you want to come watch wrestling?
Yeah.
So he would come over and,
Yeah.
we'd watch either Monday Night Raw or
so,
SmackDown or something, But he'd always want to come over to our house. And one time in a moment of vulnerability, he said to me, like, oh, I just wish I had a family like yours. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
my family's broken. My dad left. It's just me and my mom and my brother, and we're just trying to make it, and all of us are a wreck. And
Yeah.
I think being where I'm at now with a lot of years and a lot of training, just to recognize, whatever little bit of care he was spotting at our house was, and that's not to say there was a little bit, but that's just
Yeah.
the little bit that he saw, because he wasn't there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Was it that he felt emotionally starved at his place, and so he got something?
Yeah.
When he was over there, he felt seen.
Mm-hmm.
And felt seen for who he truly was.
Yeah.
And it I think as a 38-year-old guy, like looking back at those two, I don't even know how old we were then, maybe 16 or something like that.
Yeah.
But looking back at these two guys, like it makes me want to just grab both me and my
Mm-hmm.
buddy and just, squeeze them around the neck and just be like, hey, I see you guys.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your struggles matter.
Yeah.
With the story, they end up finding the body.
Yeah.
The other guys show up,
Mhm.
and you have this confrontation.
This standoff, and really, like when everybody gets there, Vern and Teddy take off.
Yeah.
And it's just
Gordy and Chris.
yeah, and Ace brings out a switchblade in this really dramatic way and says, or because I think Chris says, if you want to take the body, like you'll have to kill us for it. He said,
Yeah.
all right, cool. And then this gun that was kind of there, they talk about it in the beginning, and then it's in the campfire. All of a sudden, Gordy shoots it off, and he has this standoff.
You think Chris is by himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
because
that's
it's just
not,
him in the frame.
You didn't see
Yeah.
Gordy run off, but
Yeah.
Gordy, really before the older boys showed up, kind of was starting to have a break.
Yeah.
Like, he sees this dead body, and he goes into this
Why
moment
did you
of-
die?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he goes into this moment of, several times through flashbacks and all that, you
Mhm.
get the sense that not only did he feel invisible with his dad, but his dad saying to him, it should have been
Yeah.
you that died. It
Yeah.
shouldn't have been your
Mhm.
brother. So he goes into this moment of, it should have been me.
Yeah.
Like, he's now parroting this message that his dad had been saying to
Yeah,
him.
and in such a concrete kind of way for where they're at, he wakes up from a nightmare and talks to Chris and says, "I didn't even cry at his funeral."
Yeah.
And like, what does that mean? And Chris just says, hey, it's okay. But maybe does this mean I didn't love him as much or something like that? But yeah, when they get to the body and he's confronted with this boy, which maybe they knew, maybe they were friends, maybe they were they don't really kind of explain other than he's this thing they're going to look for. Yeah, he goes into, why did you die? Why did you leave me? And Vern and Teddy are like, who's he talking to? And Chris can see like, oh, guys, just kind of take off, let him do his thing. Can see he's talking to his brother. He's
Yeah.
not talking to Ray Brower.
Yeah, Chris was very, like, in tune and
Mhm.
aware during
Yeah.
this movie. Like,
Mhm.
he had moments with each of the other boys where he kind of spoke something into them.
Yeah.
And it's weird for a kid who doesn't feel seen for his true self
Mhm.
to be able to see others
Yeah.
and give that gift to them when when it's really the thing that he's thirsting for
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much. So, Chris is standing there. The older boys come up, and you don't know. I don't know. Like, Gordy just kind of fades out of your memory in the scene because he's just kind of having his moment. Yeah. And right when Kiefer Sutherland, in like, I don't know where Lost Boys was in the timeline, but his hair is just bleached beyond, whatever. He pulls the knife and he starts moving in, and you just hear the gunshot, and then the camera comes over on the gun in the air, pans down, and Gordy's holding it. Yeah. To finally make a stand against, this guy, but everything to kind of take control, and they have the standoff, and the young boys win, and they talk him down, and he says, this isn't over, but they leave. And that classic
comes up.
80s villain line. This isn't over.
Yeah. And they decide, I know we came here, and one of the reasons we came because we want to be on the news, but we're leaving them. Somebody else will find them.
They said an anonymous phone call is what we agreed on.
Yeah. And then they just
and I think they covered it with a blanket, too.
Yeah.
Just dignity there.
Yeah. And walk home, and the story is set in over Labor Day weekend, and they're going into junior high, and everything's about to change, but it's pretty quickly after that they walk back and say, all right, guys, well, we'll see you tomorrow. But kind of with the sense that this was the end. This was the big thing. And
they throw out that line, the town seems smaller. And the narrator, Gordy, takes over, which Richard Dreyfuss is playing his part. And says, he just kind of starts talking about the result, or not the result, how each guy kind of turned out.
Yeah.
And in the movie, there's various pairings off of each of the boys. Gordy and Vern had the moment running down the train tracks away from the train. Yeah. Gordy and Chris had their moment at the campfire. Teddy and Chris, and I guess to a certain extent Gordy at the junkyard. But they're all kind of, their relationships are shown as equal. And so you kind of think, okay, cool. So clearly these guys go into adulthood as friends, and then as they're kind of going through, the narrator says, after that, Vern and Teddy just kind of not faded out, but
they became faces in the hallway, I think he said. And there's
that
really
like, and I guess, being in adulthood and thinking back to, because I had a crew of guys in elementary school and middle school that I thought, I still remember Scott McGrady, and I still remember his phone number from elementary school, which is the craziest thing. I can't remember where I parked my car here at this office right now.
The muscle memory of
and
dialing
I can remember
it in.
his phone number. Scott McGrady, Lee Drafts, Toby Smith, Brian Evans, and thinking like, this is going to be my crew for the rest of my life. And then I remember in middle school starting to see that kind of drift.
And maybe some there was an argument, or maybe some there was this, but probably more often than not just different
classes
and stuff. And so there's a book that I got, or I borrowed from the library, that talks, it was like Stephen King and philosophy, and compares this to like they compare both Shawshank Redemption and Stand By Me. It was like levels of friendship. So like the different ones are like friendships of utility, kind of quid pro quo, what can you give me? Friendships of pleasure. So usually it's like, oh, this guy's hilarious, let's keep him around, and as my comedic stylings change, we're not as
Dance jester.
Yeah. Or like, hey, we got together and watched wrestling. And as I'm not really into wrestling anymore, we're probably not going to hang out or whatever. But the ultimate one would be a friendship of virtue, and that's what Gordy has with Chris.
Yeah.
Like, we're in it together. We're really
Stand By Me.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's really, those other two, just for whatever reason, they never got to that level. It was just either utility or, hey, pleasure. We hang around and we make each other laugh and we tell dirty jokes or whatever. But, as I'm maturing, I'm not really into that stuff anymore,
Yeah. So he says, Vern got married right out of high school.
Yeah, I think he's like a forklift operator.
Yeah, work a bunch of odd jobs around the town.
Yeah.
What do you say happened with Teddy? Teddy,
he tried to get in the Army, but because of the injuries from what his dad did, he couldn't get in from his hearing and his eyesight. So he just kind of knocked around, and I think he had been in and out of jail a little while.
Oh, yeah. And then he says with Chris, Chris enrolled in the college prep classes
Yeah.
instead of the shop classes.
Yeah. Which actually they say college classes, which was like, what? But I think they mean college prep.
Yeah.
Because what sixth graders getting into college class, So
yeah,
I think
I even thought back. I mean, I was amazed after I got out of middle and high school how quickly like the classes I was taking in high school made their way down to middle school.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I know 50s and 60s, they didn't have college prep in middle school.
No,
that's not,
Yeah.
whatever it was. But he says that he did what he thought he couldn't do. He got into the classes and that he studied and he worked hard and he became a lawyer. And then they I think he said it was like not long after he passed the bar exam or something. He went into a fast food place.
He was in Portland, went to try to break up a fight and got stabbed.
Yeah.
But it kind of comes full circle because the opening shot is Richard Dreyfuss. He has a newspaper and the headline is, local attorney has been stabbed.
No, I didn't even notice that.
So that's what propels him to go back thinking through. And then you find out it's Chris. I think the second to last line, because it comes back to present time and Richard Dreyfuss's kids are like, hey, we've been waiting to go to the pool or whatever they're waiting on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
They
that's
come
what brought
in
him down memory lane.
and then
yeah.
one of them says like, yeah, Dad's always like this when he writes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he finishes out what was he using? An Apple
Like
II
some kind of DOS program, right? The black screen with the green type. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminded me of the Journal in Doogie Howser.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's writing and he finishes out those lines like, I thought, we'd be friends forever or something like that. And
he hadn't spoken to him. I think he said like in 8 years or something. But I'll miss him.
Yeah.
And it's
who has friends like that when they're 12? Jesus, who does? Like
I think as I like the movies I like to watch. Like I said, I like to watch goofy ones and things like that. But I think more and more it's this like nostalgic thing. Like we were talking before we got going. Like, man, what parents today would they come up with a scheme? Hey, we'll say we're camping out in the backyard and then we're going to the drag races, so that'll get us until dinner tomorrow. But nowadays, I mean, with the apps that people have on their phone. There's no way they would. They said it was like 30 miles to walk to the body and walk back or something. They take that little shortcut to go through the leech water there, but it's you would never have that much time. And I think that's more and more like, man, let's think back to the simple, because I think flying cars are not that far out of the realm of imagination for me, right? Like what's
I don't know. I've been waiting on my flying car forever.
What's futuristic? I could see maybe it's not my lifetime, but like we'll never go back to being able to just take off or those kind of things.
What's interesting? I just watched this video the other night. I want to say it was on YouTube on the Vice channel.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about this movement now towards what they're calling adventure playgrounds versus safety playgrounds.
Yeah.
So the safety playground, think about what you see at McDonald's or Burger King, or if it's in a neighborhood, it's, there's like a tower and the monkey bars that come off are like yellow.
Yeah.
And they've got a plastic slide and that kind of thing. Whereas an adventure playground, and they had a word with 4 letters and each stood for something. I can't remember what they are now. But it's basically like it invokes imagination more. So it said it has to have places you can hide, and it has to have elements of stuff that you can build into another thing.
Yeah.
So like if you've got a bunch of wooden boxes or something, and it ends up looking nothing like a playground. It looks more like a junk kind of whatever. But they were talking about how in Norway they're putting a lot of these things in. And what they're noticing is kids who play on these types of playgrounds, as they grow, they mature intellectually faster.
Yeah.
And they're able to think more creatively than on these like kind of safety playgrounds. Yeah. And it's because they're exercising a part of their brain that doesn't get exercised more often.
I would. So I've been really lucky to go through this training called the neurosequential model. The guy, Dr. Bruce Perry, kind of set up this thing through the Child Trauma Academy. And what you said reminded me, he's like, he goes and does these talks in like Europe. He said, oh man, you guys are doing this. Like, where'd you come up with this? Or how are you guys getting it done? And it was kind of an offhand quote that he had in like a webinar, but it's like somebody told him, oh, we just do what you American guys plan to do or publish, and then we actually do it. So it's like, ooh, burn. But, it's those kind of things that are, probably because their countries are significantly smaller or who knows the reason or whatever. But, it's interesting. Like, so I think I have like a connection, or I think we're generally the same age. So it's like this in between, because I've like gone home and seen pictures of like the playground that was across the street from our house. It's like monkey bars over blacktop.
Yeah.
It's like, man, you would never get that, again, like, we need really safe and all this stuff. And it's like, man, there's a little, it's all right to skin a knee every now and then,
Oh yeah.
You don't want to break an arm or anything, but
My elementary school that's now closed, rest in peace, had 3 giant cement tubes, which I can only imagine were like water mains or something, but they were on the playground. And I remember as a kid climbing on top of them, inside, putting your arms against one side and your feet against the other and trying to go upside down. Like all that kind of stuff. Which is probably some kind of like, I don't know,
not wouldn't fit any regulations today or anything.
But as a kid, you just, you think towards like a Secret Life of Walter Mitty or something where somebody's just in their imagination, and that's what you were doing. Is you'd get on all these things, and it wasn't a big cement tube. It was a battleship, or it was, and you just had that something in you that was like, one day I'm gonna have my Goonies moment. One day I'm gonna have my call out of comfort to go forth. Man. Now I love this movie, and
I think people will probably be able to tell that I work mostly with young people because we skipped from thing to thing, and I don't think there was a linear part about this conversation.
That's okay.
But it was.
I don't think we have I mean, I think I've fallen into a formula for the show, but it wasn't like intentional. So to get called out of that's a good thing. So Rob, like, let's say that somebody's listening to the show today, and they just. Maybe they feel really connected and they'd love to see you as a client, or maybe they've got a son or a kid who they think, man, I would really love to get them with somebody that can help them, feel understood. How can they reach out?
So I think I have like all the platforms of social media, and I do them terribly. Like I'll post a picture on Instagram like once every 6 weeks and retweet something like once every 2 months. But I'm on just like Rob Fitzpatrick Counseling. But the best way would be to check out the Refuge Center. And it's just therefugecenter.org, or just kind of give us a call and check out what we going on and what we have going on.
Just Google Refuge Center for Counseling. It'll take you there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today and for hanging out ahead of time.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. And
absolutely.
Yeah, it's been so weird to like, it must be for you. And like, I listened to Joe Rogan's podcast based on the guests that he has, another guy, Rich Roll, and they're like both like 3 hours long. It's like, man, I feel like I know them. And so to come on, I was like, man, I feel like I know this guy already. And like also think like, man, what's Leigh-Ann gonna think? Like, we met once before. I've never met her, but it's like, you kind of feel a little bit like I know it. So it must be
oh my gosh,
for those guys who have had it
awesome.
for so long, or for you, it must be like people come up and just like, hey man, how's it? What I think you guys were talking about the Whole30 a couple months ago. Like, hey man, how'd the Whole30 go? Like, who are you? What do you? Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's really cool. I'll tell you this. My wife is the best person who's ever lived. That is maybe slightly hyperbolic, but she has the best heart of anybody I've ever met in my life. And she's going to absolutely, I think absolutely love you. We'll figure out some time to hang out, the four of us.
For sure.
That'd be cool.
So the other thing, if we could put this in there for sure, as parents, watch Stand By Me or something. I'm not cussing up and down in session or things like that. Don't worry.
Yeah, I think when we were at coffee, you said, I don't want them to think that I like endorse this movie. I was like, I think
we're not in the council room talking like around the corner or something
we're
like that.
We're using the movies as a framework to talk about other stuff. And we especially don't endorse things that were put out in the mid 80s.
Exactly. Yeah.
That wouldn't fly today.
Yeah.
So, well, cool, man. Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice. So, Leigh-Ann, I think it's important that we call attention to this week's guest. Rob was the first guest who openly wondered what you were going to say about them.
It was super weird in a good way. Like, it was a weird I didn't realize that people really listen to this part.
I have told you forever that people have come up to me and commented about you and never said the first thing about me, which is okay. In fact, I like that better just because I would be the happiest man in the world if I could just spend all of my time bragging about you. So the fact that you have fans and I am just the facilitator, I'm the delivery man that brings the Leigh-Ann to the fans.
Oh man, it's definitely not that much, but I do like doing this, and it's cool to know that people listen.
Yeah, and I have said, this is a true statement, I have said for the entirety of the time that we've been together, dating included, that I'm the president of the Leigh-Ann fan club.
That is true.
So this makes me even happier.
Yeah. Well, now fans, you know who to go to for the fan club information.
Yeah, we'll get patches.
You're going to have to pay dues.
It's true.
It'll go towards our rent.
But you can pay
or our
it.
dog.
Oh, no. I was going to say you could pay it in cake. That's not going to pay our rent.
Well, that's for you. We got.
Yeah.
For me,
I'm the president of the fan club.
I'm the person who the fans are fans of.
Well, yeah, but you think Taylor Swift gets any of the dues from her fan club?
Yes.
Oh.
100%. She owns.
She
her
gets
own
100% of the dues?
I don't know. We're getting off topic here.
It's true. Let's get back on topic. What did you think about Rob?
Oh, man. Coolest ever.
I know, right?
Yeah, it really, really and truly. Really, here's something I'd like to add, and then I'll jump into my thoughts, I promise. It is sort of a bummer sometimes to listen to these episodes after the fact and, like, not get to meet the people.
That's true.
So I think I said, like, a while or, like, a couple weeks ago that I wouldn't mind doing an episode where I get to be in the room, even if I'm not, like, on the recording part of that first conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have pitched that to you before, and you said no.
Well, I wouldn't want to do it every week. I just mean, like, that's just a lot of time commitment. But it is, like, I just want to meet all the people is what I'm trying to say, including Rob. He seems so cool. And he talked about so many things, like, that are kind of, like, youth development related and positive youth development, and that's what we talk about all day long at my job. So I was very excited and, like...
Well, I did have an idea this past week to figure out a time and a place, maybe in June, and have all of the guests that have been on so far come and meet as just like a, you know, a cool, like, hey, you know, we're all a part of this thing now.
That's great. We could make them dinner. Ooh,
we could, but I don't think they could all fit in our apartment.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
We could have a doorman with a velvet rope and let 5 of them in at a time.
Where are we gonna get a doorman?
I'll find somebody. We'll have Miller be the doorman.
He'll be a great doorman. He'll be jumping with excitement as you arrive.
He's a good boy.
Quite literally.
And as long as nobody dresses like a FedEx or UPS delivery guy, he'll be real friendly.
Yeah, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
Or don't wear backpacks. Sometimes we're not sure if he likes people with backpacks.
Oh, I think it's from what I've seen, it's people carrying bags.
Yeah. Maybe either.
Yeah.
So just careful what you wear, and also don't bring bags. But otherwise, he's super friendly.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, and also
really
don't
is.
be my dad.
Yeah.
Because he was not friendly to my dad.
But really, truly,
But that only really applies to one person. So.
Yeah.
I think
we're good. I mean, he is a good boy.
That's true.
Strangers have met him, and he
That's true.
is adored by all.
So back to Rob.
All right. Yes. And Stand By Me, which I had never seen. And I think I liked it. I know I do. I think it's one of those that, like, it's like you guys, I mean, he talked about how it's really nostalgic for him.
Uh-huh.
And things like The Sandlot, Field of Dreams, like there's other movies like that for me, so I get it. But it's one of those cases where I'm seeing a movie that probably grows in value if you see it when you're a child. Like, does that make sense? And because I'm seeing it as an adult, like, it doesn't have...
I think it's
nostalgic
more
factor.
When it comes to that, it's more like if you see a movie at a certain period of time in your childhood, it gets like locked in a box.
Yes.
And because it's in the box, you hold it in high esteem.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time with things that are like that, if you go back and watch them later, you're like, whoa, this is hot garbage. And occasionally you get something like this where I feel like it holds up versus like, and I'm trying to think of an example of something that I saw as a kid that is just, the first thing that comes to mind, which is just the most ridiculous thing in the world, was like Superman 3. Like Superman 3 had this plot. It had Richard Pryor in it. It had a lady that got sucked into a computer and turned into a robot. And as a kid, I was like enthralled and terrified. And as an adult, I'm watching it going, this is a disaster.
Yeah. I think, though, that there's a difference. Like, I think you said a second ago that most things, if you see it as an adult, you realize it's hot garbage. But I feel like I've had the opposite experience where there's a couple things that I see that like I watched once as a kid and in my head I thought, oh, that was great. And then when I saw it again, it was terrible. But for these movies, because of the nostalgic factor, like there's some emotional connection to it. And so it's not the kind of thing that you watch once or twice as a kid and then once as an adult. You watch it like throughout your life. And so there's like an element of, I don't know, like it's been with you since childhood. I don't know. All of this is to say, I did like it. I did like the movie. Thumbs up. I think I mentioned earlier, he talked a lot of positive youth development. I also learned a lot. Such an educational episode. He mentioned the 4 S's, which I don't know what those are. I think he said them in the episode, and I should have written them down, but I was driving, so I couldn't. But I will Google them later. But I don't know. It was like an attachment thing. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you remember when he said the 4 S's?
I might remember at a time other than 11:22 at night. But right now, I'm having trouble remembering.
It was towards the beginning. He was talking about how he talked about the 4 S's and then how he got all of these things fulfilled, like these attachment needs fulfilled, but maybe just by different people, like because of the community that he lived in and stuff like that. So anyways, the 4 S's was new to me. And then again, like in that same little part of the conversation when you guys were talking about getting those needs fulfilled, and then just like kids these days and being able to say, you know, I see you, you're not invisible to me, and how meaningful that is. All of that together just reminded me of mentoring, which is what I do for a job. Like I support mentoring relationships. And so, there was a lot in this episode, but particularly that part that just, it was like screaming at me. This is why, you know, safe, caring, like relationships with adults are so important to kids. And this is why like something like being a mentor, even if it's not in a formal program, like I'm not trying to pitch, you know, our program or whatever, but I just think like if you have a chance, if you care about a kid or if you have a chance to build, you know, a relationship with a kid, that can just be such an impactful thing. It can literally make the difference in a kid having, you know, positive versus negative outcomes in their life. So anyways, just a pitch for mentoring and caring adults in kids' lives. And I think it's really cool that Rob gets to, you know, play the role that he does, it sounds like. So that's cool. He also said, I have the quote written down, which I wrote down the quote and not the context. So if I get the context wrong, then I'm sorry. But he was talking about telling someone who I guess has been traumatized, like, if you're alive, you're doing something right, which I love. Like, I think if you're not used to it, then using that strengths-based kind of perspective can be tough. Like, it can be hard if it's not how your mind usually works, or it's, you know, the strengths aren't what your mind usually focuses on. But I love starting from there. Like, you're alive, so you're doing something right. What have you done to stay alive? let's work off of those. Like, let's point out those things, which for anyone is super impactful, but also kids. Just hearing, like, rather than hearing the things that they need to grow in, I think if you focus on skills that somebody has, or, coping mechanisms that they've developed and how they've gotten really good at it, or whatever it is, I think that's more likely to be motivating to people than, focusing on their, whatever the opposite of strengths are, detriments, weaknesses. Oh my gosh. It's really late at night.
I think I like to use in my practice the words virtues or deficits. Just because I think strengths and weaknesses has just been watered down.
Yeah. So
I think about it as, hey, let's throw out some words that are at least going to have them go, huh.
I like strengths. I do think weaknesses, though, I don't like. Like, I would rather say, what's the thing that you talk about in, like, a job?
Opportunity for growth.
Yeah. So anyways, it was cool to hear that quote as sort of a starting point for a strengths perspective. Another thing that I learned, essence, the essence of adolescence. We had to Google it a minute ago because I forgot what all the letters stood for. But if somebody out there, if you listened and you missed that part, go and Google the essence of adolescence, because it is really fascinating and
it just
cool
brings up
information.
an advertisement for Axe body spray.
Gross. But also a really cool article, or book. I don't know. I'm not the one who quoted it. I'm just saying, make sure you pay attention to that because it's cool information. So then, Rob was talking about, I think this is when you guys were talking about the junkyard and the dog and all of that good stuff. Ooh, I think it was then. Anyways, you were talking about Teddy and him seeing his dad as a hero, like, sort of despite.
It's when they get over the fence at the junkyard and the guy that owns it is, like,
yes,
shouting personal things.
And Teddy, like, defends his dad. That's what it was. And Rob says you can really tell that Teddy, like, his dad is his hero, I guess, in his, like, good moments where he's not, doing terrible things. And I thought that was interesting. I think that's tough for me to wrap my head around, like, that he could be his hero and also treat him so terribly. But I also think that's a good example of, like, how important it is for parental figures to, I don't know, be nice to their kids, like, or just how important it is for kids to have attention and love and admiration and approval from their parents. Just in general, I think when approval from your parents is missing.
Wait, you almost just hit, like, a bunch of A's. You said attention and love and admiration and approval. Switch up love for affection. Attention, affection, admiration, approval, and then write a book on that.
I just made the 4 A's. Oh my gosh! Copyright. Nobody better publish this. This is going to be my dissertation. Anyways. Yeah, I just think it's a good example of that. Like, it seems like, whatever attention that, whatever of the 4 A's that he got from his dad, I'm sure he just clung to as kind of like the shining hope of their relationship. And I just think it can really impact a person to not have those things from their parents in the long run. So, and then I think the last thing that really, like, stood out is you guys had a little teeny conversation about just kind of, like, you just mentioned privilege and kind of, like, the representation in the movie and the fact that it was, like, all white people and there were 2 women and all that good stuff, which, I mean, like, movie in the 80s, set in whatever time it's set in. So, like, I get it, but I was glad you guys mentioned it, because I think it's easy for us as white people and probably for you guys as white men to see this story about the 4 boys and really identify with them. And while there's certainly characteristics of the boys that everybody could identify with, I just think we take it for granted a lot, that we are represented in movies all the time. Like, I can identify with characters all the time because they look like me. And it's just really important that we add some more diversity in our modern day so that kids can see themselves in movies and can see themselves in these stories and situations, where they see like resiliency and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm a giant fan of the power of story being able to unlock something in people. And I think that one of the ways that various movements have happened across history is when stories begin getting told, because I don't think that somebody can articulate a desire that they have until they have words to do that with. And so for a person to hear or see a story involving a person who looks like them, a person who they can identify with, I think it gives that viewer, that individual, the chance to encounter something that may be outside of their world right now, and because of that have something unlocked within them that could lead them to great things. And so I think that we as a culture, like I would love to see, representation of any and every group, just because everybody has a story to tell.
And I feel like it helps you process, your own story to see other people's story played out. So yeah, just agree. Retweet.
Word.
That's all.
Nice.
Such a great episode. So cool. Rob, I'm a fan of you.
I totally agree about it being a great episode and about being a fan of Rob. So we've had a big day here, and I think after now that we've got this on tape, that we could lower the curtain and raise the lights and say that for this week, the theater is closed.